Indigenous rights in the Arctic are a global issue that must be addressed. Indigenous peoples in the Arctic have faced centuries of oppression and marginalization by governments and corporations. The Arctic is a home to many diverse cultures with unique ways of life, and these rights must be respected and protected. The Arctic is home to a wide variety of indigenous peoples, including the Inuit, Aleut, Sami, and Russian peoples. These groups have been living in the Arctic for thousands of years, with distinct cultures, languages, and traditional knowledge. However, over the past few centuries, their rights and way of life have been threatened by a variety of factors. The first threat to Arctic indigenous rights is the exploitation of natural resources. The Arctic is home to vast amounts of oil, gas, and minerals, and many corporations have been eager to exploit these resources without regard for the rights of the indigenous peoples. In recent years, there has been an increased push to open the Arctic to oil and gas exploration, which has been met with fierce resistance from indigenous communities. Another major threat to indigenous rights in the Arctic is climate change. The Arctic is one of the most vulnerable regions to the impacts of climate change, and indigenous communities are already experiencing the devastating effects. Rising temperatures are causing sea ice to melt at an alarming rate, which is threatening the traditional way of life of many indigenous peoples in the Arctic. In addition to exploitation and climate change, Arctic indigenous peoples face other threats to their rights, such as discrimination, violence, and poverty. Indigenous peoples in the Arctic are often excluded from decision-making processes and lack adequate access to basic services such as healthcare and education. In recent years, there has been an increased focus on protecting the rights of Arctic indigenous peoples. The United Nations has adopted the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, which sets out the rights of indigenous peoples around the world, including those in the Arctic. Additionally, the Arctic Council has been working to ensure that Arctic indigenous rights are respected and protected. Despite these developments, there is still much work to be done to ensure that the rights of Arctic indigenous peoples are respected and protected. It is essential that governments, corporations, and other stakeholders recognize the unique rights and culture of Arctic indigenous peoples and work together to ensure their rights are respected. In conclusion, indigenous rights in the Arctic are a global issue that must be addressed. It is essential that governments, corporations, and other stakeholders recognize the unique rights and culture of Arctic indigenous peoples and work together to protect their rights and way of life.